Hello! Happy Thrive Thursday, Success and Fulfillment Circle family. I am so excited to be with you today. And today we are actually talking about something that specifically does have to do with us in real estate, but I think that also does encompass a lot to do, with our overall lives. It's for us, our clients, and our customers. And the point that I want to make today is know your limit and stay within it. So I think that's a great tidbit that I actually heard from a financial advisor I listened to speak on one of these training things that I was listening to, named Roy Simon, and he talks a lot about that, know your limit and stay within it, specifically when it has to do with pre-approval. So I know that that is something that we talk to our customers and clients about as real estate agents. Before you go, obviously, looking at properties, you don't want to be looking at something that is above your limit, fall in love with it, and really it's out of your scope, or you're stretching yourself too thin. So I think it's important to point that out, because again, these are conversations, some of us are used to having. But I think it's important to also help lend some guidance sometimes around what that looks like, because as we know, that doesn't just mean, the purchase price of the property, for example. That also encompasses, what your closing costs are going to be, what are your bank fees, legal fees, stamp duty, and all of those, right? So I think it's one of those reminders to really, for us, and helping guiding our customers and clients on really the full scope of what that looks like, because there's nothing worse than really getting to that point, helping a buyer find something they love, their offer gets accepted, and then they're realizing that really they've stretched themselves too thin. They may not also have the deposit amount in addition to the legal fees that they need to pay and the bank fees and things like that. So we want to do everything that we can to really prevent that kind of situation, right? And even for ourselves, right? Knowing what our boundaries are when it comes to, conversations that we might be having with vendors, for example, where we're assisting them with pricing a property, for example. And, we know that it's really, the market data is showing that it's going to be in this particular range, but they have a certain number in mind that they know, they really, really want to achieve this. These are really conversations that we've been having a lot lately, and depending on when people purchased and when they're selling, sometimes it might not completely align, or dependent on if they've put a lot of personal touches into a property where they've invested a lot themselves, so they have a number of what they feel they've put into it. But it's not always the case of that being what fair market value is right now. So I say that because sometimes we have to show our customers and clients really what that realistic figure is. And it's important for us to know their boundaries and their limits, whether it comes to buying or selling, so that we can also best guide them, because you don't want to be, for example, sending a buyer properties that are above their range, and again, they're falling in love with these particular types of properties, but realistically, the one that would work for them best, maybe it would need a little bit more, TLC, for example, but they've gotten used to seeing all of these beautifully modern, move-in ready properties. Not to say that that's not a good thing sometimes, so they're aware of what that can look like. However, if they know what their limits actually are, they will really be able to, be that much more prepared going into the market, and also when they're actually making offers on properties, right? So, I think that has, it's an important thing to remind ourselves, and our clients, because, even right now, as we're sharing different benefits, right, it's great for us to be able to share, like, for example, this week we've just had the announcement of the first-time buyer benefits, which has now, been improved in a way, as far as like people that are first-time buyers being able to purchase a home up to $1 million without paying the stamp duty. And so that is something that, again, we need to remind those buyers of, but also what those restrictions particularly are, and then still reminding them that they may need to actually have those funds set aside just in case they don't get that approval of that exemption. It's a possibility, but it's not a guarantee, right? So it's really, knowing what those limits are and helping them stay within it. And again, I think it's a good reminder for us in all aspects as well. Like I was saying, when we're talking about, a vendor that might be trying to sell something that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars over what we know fair market value is going to be, you personally need to decide if that's something that you are willing to take on with your time, your marketing initiatives, your resources, when you will realistically know if that is or is not going to sell in these next couple months. You kind of have to make that commercial decision for you. That will be different for different agents and different people at different times. If you're, pretty loaded up with other listings, then that might be the time where, you've got to have really that heart-to-heart conversation with them of, really this isn't something that is going to sell in that time frame. Maybe we revisit that a few months down the road. Or like you say, you might be able to say, yeah, let's take that on, but have that pricing conversation after the first 30 days or the first 60 days of it being on the market and really getting that market data, right? So, even in all of that, like a lot of times, even still, when we're looking at like the mortgage pre-approvals, for example, like that's exactly where this started, is like that knowing your limit and staying within it with the banks. That also applies to people that are cash buyers and people that might be doing some creative financing options like personal loans, because that's something that is, I find, becoming a little bit more common as well. But in that, still letting people know that, even if you're a cash buyer, you really need to know what those limits are, because even more so, that at that point, you're the one having to completely do all of your due diligence, whereas the banks would make sure that you've got that appraisal done, or, that you're not going to stretch yourself too thin. They've got their, their lending ratios, that they are comfortable with. And as a cash buyer or someone getting private financing, you've got to really do that due diligence for yourself. So it's really knowing firmly what those boundaries are, so that also you're not buying a property and then you've used every single penny that you have, and then you can't feed yourself after you buy a property, or you've stretched yourself too thin on what those mortgage payments will realistically be, or those personal loan payments, or all that cash that you've used that you now don't have as any kind of emergency fund as well. Because at the end of the day, if you're buying a property, that is something that you will still need to have those, those maintenance fees, or those, like I say, kind of like emergency fund, or, say that the refrigerator stops working, or the washer or the dryer, and these kind, you need to have a little something in your back pocket for that as well. So I thought it was really important to, go ahead and point that out, so that you're set up for success when you're having these conversations, and likewise your customers and clients are the best set up for when they enter the market. Because as we know, the market has been really tight in many different segments, in many different ways. So I think it's, it's great for us to know what those boundaries are for the people that we're working with and for ourselves with our levels of business, because you want to be able to give the top level of service that you want to give as well. And realistically, if you're stretching yourself too thin, that's doing everyone that you're working with a disservice, right? You can't do everything. And at the end of the day, if you are trying to take on more than you feel like you can handle right now, as we've talked about in the past and other videos, you do have other options for that. So it's like, you may need additional resources, or you may need to kind of regroup and reprioritize where your energy is going. Are you focusing a lot on rentals or on sales or on buyers or on listings? And which of these are bringing you the most profit, but also fulfillment? Because you've got to look at where your energy is going as well. So when we look at the amount of time, resources, and things that we're putting into things, your energy is also a resource that you need to be mindful of. So again, those are one of those boundaries and limits that I think it's really important to remind ourselves of in these times as well. So, again, I just hope that that's a good reminder for you guys, and maybe it will help you kind of like reflect on maybe some of the people that you're currently working with, or these conversations that you're entering, and being able to really, even having that initial first conversation with your customers and clients about those boundaries, about those limits. I think that getting that conversation, really over with in the beginning is the best thing that you can do for everybody involved, because then the expectations are there and they're set, and you're more set up for success as you move through, showing them other properties, or giving those vendor that feedback on, the showings that you have, or things like that. And really knowing, like, for example, if you've got a vendor that's only willing to sell in a certain price range, you are then able kind of better to navigate those conversations when you have buyers or things like that that are kind of walking through the property. Not that you're going to share that particular price, but you'll better be able to navigate maybe vetting those prospects before they get in, and knowing how flexible that vendor may or may not be, so that you're not wasting anyone's time, their time or your time, right? So again, I think that sometimes we get almost uncomfortable with having these conversations early on. We kind of wait until, late in the day or late in the process to have these conversations sometimes. But I think there's nothing better than really like hitting that first off and having that conversation first, because if not, realistically, it's a more difficult conversation to have later on rather than really having that first. So like I said, I wanted today's Thrive Thursday training tip to just really be an overview of knowing those limits and staying within it, and finding those best ways for you to be able to do that for you personally in your life and your business, and then also being able to assist and educate your customers and clients on knowing their limits and their boundaries so that you can best serve them, right? So, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that, or if this has helped you reassess, or if you have already assessed kind of what your limits and boundaries are for your level of business, the things that you find the most fulfilling, and likewise customers and clients that you're working with. Is this a conversation that you regularly have already early on, or have you found times where you have these conversations a little bit later, where that may have strayed or kind of not been the best with like managing those expectations? I would love to hear either in our one-on-ones, or go ahead and comment, and start the conversation with us here in the Success and Fulfillment Circle group, because I think this is something that really applies to each of us, and we can really learn from each other in these kind of situations. So again, guys, I hope you found that helpful, and otherwise I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week. I'm really looking forward to our catch-ups, and I will talk to you guys later, okay? Chat soon. Bye.